And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Now, I am just checking to see if this actually shows up then on my art Facebook page. Because as you know, ladies and gentlemen, I have been fighting with Faceplant because they don't like StreamYard anymore. I don't see it here on my Facebook art page. I see an invitation to go see myself over at YouTube. Start live video. Let's try it. What happens when I click that? No, that's not what we want. Never mind. All right, ladies and gentlemen, to hell with that, as we say. All right, anyone out there? Let's see. It says one person is watching, so someone out there is watching. Any of you trying to watch me over on Faceplant, I'm sorry if that's not working out so well for you. Anyway, hope a few people are over here on the YouTubes, or somehow people are managing to watch this. It is a lovely autumnal night here in Bellows Falls, Vermont, ladies and gentlemen. The cats have been achieved. That's how you know it's autumnal, because if it was a lovely summer night, they would be out having themselves a good time. But no, they're inside. Sharp. Today I sliced and started to dehydrate 20 pounds of tomatoes. And Charbonneau spent most of the time while I was doing that pushing the container of treats around the kitchen with his nose, just to let me know what he might prefer that I was doing rather than slicing tomatoes. Anyway, it's a joy to be here. We have the second half of Experiment 13. But first, we've got a lot of people to thank. The unidentified unglet in the can, because you know, if you're now supporting my Substack, you get a shout out. And this month, well, last month we donated to the Community Asylum Seekers Project. And this month we have donated to Wild Goose Players, our local theater company, because they've got a big spring production, but they're kind of a money trough during the autumn. So our little contribution is helpful unto them. So we thank all of you who are subscribers, paying subscribers to my Substack. If you too want to join my Substack, you can just go to hunter-studio.com and use the sign up form. It's now my mailing list, but it's a mailing list with a charitable aspect to it, ladies and gentlemen. But just go to hunter-studio.com and there you are. Blah, 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 blah. Let's get going. We got a bunch of people to thank. We have to thank Ms. Kiana Carroll. We have to thank Carol Burning. Susan McNeil, Mr. Omaha himself, John Wilhelm, Vermont artist extraordinaire Kate Fry, Cindy Baker, animal painter Nancy Bass, the great Catherine Fisher, Missouri artist extraordinaire, Ms. Helen Sisek, Mr. Marlon Gibson, I think it's a Mr. Anyway, Marlon Gibson, Vermont, a person who goes around doing good. Ms. Ann Cousins, my good friend Gene Fry, Mr. Terry Widener, illustrator, amazing illustrator, ladies and gentlemen. MJ Brush, Mr. Jeb Hart, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Jeb Hart, not only at one time was he the manager of the Jay Giles Band, but I first met him probably about 20 years ago when I had a storefront in Bellows Falls. And this feller came in because he liked all the railroad stuff I had on the walls. And we got to talking. It turned out he was an executive for Arista Records. And he had read that small town post offices were in danger of being closed. So he took all of Arista Records' mailing budget and would drive around on weekends going to the smallest town post offices he could and buying stamps at those post offices in order to help small towns. He's a good man, ladies and gentlemen. He's a good man. He's Harry Chapin's half brother also. My good friend, Mr. Jeb Hart. Let's see. Oh, my stalker. The wonderful artist from Atlanta, Rhea Bruns. Miss Christina Stockman. Lizzie Grosso. And in Saxons River, Vermont, she cannot find this this channel to save her life, but she still supports it, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Martha Rowley, Nancy Rasnick, Deborah Levitt, down there in Texas, Mr. James Gilbraith, and out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, ladies and gentlemen, he's my very, very, very tall cousin. He's got a wee little dog named Ginger. He's got a wonderful wife named Elise. My very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter. Thank you all so much. And now, to the conclusion of Experiment 13. Laurie Marichaux says she is here, Charles, on the faceplant. Oh, good. You found it on the faceplant. Awesome. So as we all remember, last week, Dulcie Dooner, the aggrieved ne'er-do-well of Centerburg, Ohio, inherited some mysterious seeds and a greenhouse. And human nature being what it is, he planted those seeds. Ladies and gentlemen. They came up, they grew, and they turned out to be giant ragweed. And they are now towering over the town of Centerburg, Ohio. They're ragweed, all right, said Homer. I expect they'll blossom in a few days. Oh, we better get the mayor and go see Dulcie, Uncle Ulysses suggested. And the sober little group from the lunchroom started for the town hall. The dentist and several patients came out to see what was going on, and they joined the group. So did the plumber, the jeweler, the printer, and the druggist. I have a feeling, said the barber, taking leave of the gathering crowd, that Dulcie will probably be in one of his arguing moods. I'm going right home and pack my bag. Just the thought of those things makes me sneeze. An awful lot of folk are troubled with hay fever, said the druggist. Reminds me I'd better order a carload of paper handkerchiefs. When all those thousands of buds open up and start filling the air with pollen, this place is going to look like the Dust Bowl, said the dentist. Uncle Ulysses and the sheriff went into the mayor's office while the others waited outside. Almost at once, the mayor came rushing out of the town hall. He shaded his eyes with his hand, looked solemnly up and across the square at Dulcie's 13 colossal ragweeds silhouetted against the afternoon sky. Everyone knew that the mayor was susceptible to hay fever, so they were not at all surprised when he pulled out his handkerchief just from force of habit. For a minute, it looked as if the mayor might start running, but he tucked away his handkerchief, squared his shoulders, and started walking grimly toward Dulcie's. The crowd followed along behind. And here's the picture, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the picture. Look at the citizens of Centerburg, Ohio. They are marching across the town square, past the movie theater, across the town green, and where behind the church must be Dulcie's greenhouse with its giant ragweeds. Oh, my goodness. Dulcie came running out to meet them. "They're budding," he shouted. "They got thousands and thousands of buds. Howdy, Mayor," he greeted. "I was just about to come see you. I wanted to ask you, could you send the fire department out here so I can cut off a few sprigs of buds to exhibit? My ladder is too small to reach even the lowest branches." The mayor was slightly taken aback by Dulcie's request, and he could not think of what to say or how to begin. "I could cut off a few sprigs for you, Mayor," said Dulcie generously to help the mayor decide. "They'll look mighty nice in a vase in your office when those blossoms come out." "Dulcie, the mayor began, and he could not continue. Dulcie Dooner looked around at the solemn faces of the crowd. "What's the matter? This is a big thing for Centerburg. Don't you frown at me, Sheriff. I'm being a good citizen. My plants will put this town on the map. I'm doing a lot for this town, so how about loaning me that town hook and ladder?" "Dulcie, we," began the mayor unhappily. "As mayor of Centerburg, I am sorry to inform you that your plants are ragweed." Dulcie swallowed hard, craned his neck to look up at his tremendous weeds. In the unhappy silence, the gay singing of the birds seemed out of place, and the slight rustle of the giant ragweed leaves suddenly sounded ominous in the summer afternoon. "Ragweeds? Why, darned if they ain't," said Dulcie. He seemed disappointed that there'd be no fruit or berries to sell, but then he smiled and said, "Well, anyway, I got the biggest dang ragweeds in the world. That'll make Centerburg famous. So look, Mayor, how about that ladder?" See here, Dulcie," said the mayor. "Ragweed pollen gives people hay fever." Dulcie looked around at the worried faces. "Oh, shucks, don't you trouble yourselves about me. I'll be all right. I never get hay fever." Now, that, ladies and gentlemen, was always when we read this story in my family, that was a moment when my mother would say, "That is the sin of particularity." And as a child, I thought that was one word, the sin of particularity. And she always used to tell the story of when she was a camp counselor, ladies and gentlemen. She was a camp counselor at my brother William, who is indisposed at the moment, but my brother William, who may be watching, he might remember what camp that was. But my mother was counselor at summer camp. And one day they were going off blueberry picking or something, and she and her little charges set across a field, and the little children were romping behind my mother, and the head counselor yelled at my mother, "Edith, you're going through poison ivy." And my mother turned and said, "Don't worry about it. I don't get poison ivy." The next week, all the little children were incapacitated with swollen eyes shut. There's a good case of the sin of particularity right there, which Dulcie was just exhibiting. All right, enough of the sidebar there. In the interest of public health and pursuit of happiness, for the best interest of the town of Centerburg, Ohio, I ask you as a good citizen to cut down your ragweeds," said the mayor. "Cut them down?" cried Dulcie. "Cut my ragweeds?" he asked, as though he could not believe his ears. "No," he shouted. "No, I will not cut them down." And the citizens watched Dulcie turn on his heel, stamp into his greenhouse, and slam the door. "Well, he didn't argue much," said the sheriff tartly. The mayor glanced uneasily up at the thousands of giant ragweed buds swaying innocently in the breeze. Sword of Damocles, Uncle Ulysses exclaimed softly. In a matter of hours, those buds will open. The pollen will, oh, I hate to think of it. Time is important, said the mayor. We must hold a special town meeting this very evening and decide what to do. Everyone come to the town hall at 7:30. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as a veteran of small town politics, don't they have to warn that meeting? Or maybe because it's an emergency, they don't have to do the normal warning of it. Anyway, everyone come to the town hall at 7:30. Until then, I'll be at my desk and I will welcome any and all suggestions. Oh, I read that a little wrong. I'll be at my desk and I will welcome any and all suggestions, he added humbly, of how to deal with this. This, the greatest and gravest threat our town has ever known. Homer, Freddie said on the way back to town, my grandma was right. Experiment 13. 13 plants. That's superstition, Homer replied. Let's go along with Uncle Ulysses and see what's going to happen. Uncle Ulysses, the sheriff, the dentist, the printer, Homer, and Freddie found the barber, suitcase in hand, tucking the key to his shop into the crack in the barber pole. They persuaded him to walk over and attend the town meeting that evening. So he opened his shop and he invited them all in. If ordinary ragweed gives some people hay fever, the printer reasoned, then these things will probably be enough to affect everybody. This town will sneeze itself plumb out of the state of Ohio, the sheriff declared. They're growing just west of town, too, the dentist said. The prevailing winds will blow all the pollen smack down our throats. Ulysses, you're a man of ideas, said the barber. What are we going to do? Uncle Ulysses was thinking hard. He paced the floor and he said, we could air condition the town, but that would cost a lot. Not enough time either, not enough time. Then again, we might drop dry ice in the clouds from an airplane and make it rain. That'll keep down the pollen. What clouds? Asked the barber gloomily, looking out at the clear blue sky. Dulcie might change his mind, said the printer. Not Dulcie, said the sheriff. We might as well decide to take what's coming and all go to bed with a big supply of paper handkerchief. Chapper, hanker, pipe, dad, you know what I mean. Tenzing cliches. Nobody knew what to do. There was a long line of people waiting to buy tickets at the railroad station. Just like the barber, other businessmen, the plumber, the hardware dealer, the jeweler, even lawyer Stobbs were closing their shops and offices and hanging out cards saying, out of town, reopening shortly after the first frost. But everybody stayed in town to attend the town meeting as a last hope. Along towards 7 o'clock, Centerburg was a town of gloom. As the sun dropped lower and lower, groups of residents gathered in the square, and as the sun dropped even lower, the shadows lengthened. The longest shadows by far were the shadows of Dulcie's 13 giant ragweeds. And the people watched them extend across and darken the square and ease slowly up and darken Uncle Ulysses' lunchroom, up and darken the movie theater, and last of all, the steeple of the Methodist church. From one corner of the square, there came angry shouts. Let's chop them down, burn them, spray them with weed killer, spray Dulcie too. But the sheriff was right on the job. Hold on, boys, he shouted. You can't destroy private property in this town. Let's get into the meeting and solve this thing the regular way. And he headed the disturbers into the town hall along with everybody else. Everybody was there. Yes, Everybody, Dulcie came too. He walked into the hall at the very last minute, and all eyes were turned to the rear, where Dulcie stood with the people who could not find seats. Seeing that his fellow citizens expected him to say something, Dulcie cleared his throat and said, "I've been thinking. We could solve this problem the democratic way just as easy as that." He snapped his fingers, and a murmur of hope sounded through the hall. "Yep," said Dulcie, gathering courage. "Centerburg don't need no crop of ragweed." At this, the murmur grew louder, and someone shouted, "Good boy, Dulcie. This town don't need ragweeds," he repeated. Then he took a deep breath and he said, "When the government decides that the country doesn't need cotton, the government pays the farmer to plow it under. When the government decides there are too many potatoes, the government pays to have them destroyed. Now, I reckon since Centerburg doesn't need no ragweeds, well, I reckon the town ought to pay me so they can get rid of them. I figure $1,000 and expenses paid in cash ought to be a fair price." Another murmur went through the hall. The printer rose from his seat, addressed the mayor. "Mr. Mayor, $1,000 seems a big price for a crop of ragweed." These are big ragweeds, Your Honor," said Dulcie modestly. "The sum should be paid by the national government, not by the town of Centerburg," said Lawyer Stobbs. At this, the county agent jumped to his feet and cried, "I make a motion that the town pay Dulcie. By the time we filled out all that paperwork and sent it to Washington, it would be far too late." "I second that motion," said the barber. Over the whispering of the audience, the mayor called for silence and said, "A motion has been made and seconded that the town pay Dulcie Dooner $1,000 in expenses in cash for his ragweed plants. Because time is short and at any hour the plants may break into bloom, we will have an oral vote. All those in favor say aye." "Aye," said everyone. "Anyone against?" said the mayor. No one spoke. "Majority rule," said Dulcie. "It's nice we can solve this problem so democratic-like." Then he made his way to the front of the hall and handed the mayor a paper listing his expenses. 70 bags of vitamin plant food at $4 a bag, $280. 2 assistants at $13 each, $26. Rubbing alcohol for lame back, $7.13. Total expenses, $313.13. The mayor read this aloud and then said, "Added on to the $1,000, the total amount due to Mr. Dooner is $1,313.13. Homer, Homer, whispered Freddie. "There's those numbers again. That means more trouble." "Shh, Freddie," said Homer. "Look, the town treasurer and the banker are leaving to get the cash for Dulcie." When the treasurer returned from the bank, he carefully counted out $1,313 in bills into Dulcie's eager hand. And then, just as carefully, he counted out the dime and 1, 2, 3 pennies. Dulcie stuffed the money into his pockets, and the mayor announced that after the meeting, the fire department, any man who might care to volunteer, any people who might care to volunteer, would cut down the giant ragweeds and attend to the burning of the trunks and stems and blossoms. The people applauded and they cheered with relief now that the threat had been dealt with. Life in Centerburg would not come to a sneezing halt, and business could be resumed as usual. The mayor held up his hand for silence. "Now that we're all assembled, is there anything else that should be brought before the meeting?" he asked. Yeah, said the town treasurer. This business has left the town finances pretty low. We ought to discuss how to raise $1,313.13 to make the budget come out all right. We could have some new taxes, Dulcie suggested happily. An extra penny on ice cream cones, tax on movies, penny tax here and there. Nobody will hardly notice it. That is impractical, said the banker. Think of the bookkeeping, trying to keep track of a penny here and a penny there. Borrow the money from the bank and take 10 years to pay it back in easy installments. Oh, don't do that, cautioned Dulcie. The town can't be paying for this year's ragweed next year. You see, I got lots more seed locked up in the bank. And next year, I'm counting on a bumper crop, a giant ragweed, maybe 100 times as much. Homer, whispered Freddie, how much is 100 times $1,313.13? And the whisper sounded loud over the troubled silence. Seems as if our troubles are never over, the mayor said sadly. Dulcie Dooner seemed to be the only happy person in the whole population of Centerburg. Say, he suggested brightly, how about a tax on donuts? Say 25 cents a dozen. No, shouted Uncle Ulysses. You can't get away with that. It's preposterous to think that the donut eaters of Centerburg are going to pay for your ragweed growing, Dulcie Dooner. No need to get mad, Ulysses, said Dulcie. Let's do this thing democratic-like. Uncle Ulysses called out, Mr. Mayor, I move that we put a tax of 25 cents on a dozen ragweed seeds. I second that motion, said the printer over Dulcie's shouts of, no, no. When the mayor called for a vote, the ayes won and only one person voted no. Mr. Mayor, said the banker, I move that this tax be collected immediately in cash. I second that motion, said the dentist. There was plenty of chuckling and laughing throughout the hall now, and everybody gleefully voted aye. Everybody, that is, except Dulcie Dooner. He voted no. Mr. Dooner, chuckled the mayor, majority rule, remember? Let's be a good citizen about this. You're stepping on the minority's toes, Dulcie shouted, but no one seemed to take notice. The mayor appointed Uncle Ulysses ragweed seed counter and made him chairman of a committee to count the seeds and to collect the tax from Dulcie. Then at last the meeting was over. The people were in a celebrating mood. The fire bell jangled merrily, and the fire department took over the rush job of disposing of Dulcie's plants. Groups of singing people were soon clustered around fires of burning ragweed, and it made a pretty sight, what with the spotlights of the fire truck alternating red and white flashes. There was the sound of axes and the sound of saws, and then the excited cry of timber, followed by the earth-trembling crash as a stalk of giant ragweed hit the ground. And here's the picture, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the picture of the citizens of Centerburg and the fire department and the burning of the ragweed. Oh my. Oh my. Such a good drawing. There goes the 13th ragweed plant, said Freddie with relief. You still worried about numbers, Freddie? Homer asked. Then he said, let's go back to the bank and see how Uncle Ulysses is getting on counting ragweed seeds. Now, here's that picture, ladies and gentlemen. There's Uncle Ulysses counting seeds. And I'm sure we're going to learn who all these people are, but somebody there tallying the numbers, somebody there multiplying the numbers. There's Homer and Freddie, and there's a very irritated Dulcie Dooner. All right. Oh, aren't they great illustrations, Helen? Aren't they great? Homer and Freddie peeked through the window of the bank. It was closed up tight, and Uncle Ulysses and his committee were not inside counting seeds. Then they looked in the barber shop. The mayor, the sheriff, and the barber and lawyer Stobbs were playing rummy, but Uncle Ulysses and his committee, they were not there. They finally found the seed counters in the lunchroom. Uncle Ulysses was hunched over, squinting through a magnifying glass, counting the tiny, giant ragweed seeds. Every time Uncle Ulysses counted 12, the jeweler put down a mark, and the banker, who excelled at arithmetic, was multiplying the number of marks by 25 cents to find out how much the tax of 25 cents a dozen on ragweed seeds was mounting up to. And Dulcie was there watching like a hawk to see that nobody made mistakes in his counting or marking or multiplying. All four were so intent upon their job that they did not notice when Homer and Freddie arrived. 3,999, said the jeweler. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, counted Uncle Ulysses. 4,000 dozen, said the jeweler. 4,000 dozen times 25 cents is $1,000 tax, said the banker, and we still have several thousand dozen seeds inside that jar to count. Looks like the town's going to make some money on this tax, said the jeweler. No, it ain't, cried Dulcie. Not from me, it ain't. He counted out $1,000, slammed the money down on the table. There's your darn $1,000, and I'm keeping my expenses. Then he headed for the door. Just a minute, Dulcie, cried Uncle Ulysses. There are a lot more of your seeds to count and tax. My seeds, my eye, shouted Dulcie. You can shove them all in your shoe. I never want to look at another seed. And he slammed the door of the lunchroom on his way out. What are you going to do with the seeds, Uncle Ulysses? Asked Homer. Oh, hello, boys, Uncle Ulysses said. You're just the fellows we need here. Homer, Freddie, you finish counting these things. It's pretty fine work and takes a young, sharp eye. We old fellows are pretty tired. Besides, we'd better go across to the barber shop and report to the mayor. Homer and Freddie started counting, and the committee went off to make its report. Gosh, Homer, Freddie complained, there's still thousands of seeds here to count. It's going to take all night. I don't see why they have to be counted anyway. Dulcie isn't going to pay any more tax on them. It's important to count them, though, said Homer. You know something, Freddie? Counting and keeping track of every single one of these seeds is just about the most important job in Centerburg. More important than being a mayor? Asked Freddie. Sure, said Homer, because if one single seed got out, it might just grow into a giant ragweed. Just one giant-sized ragweed might not make everybody sneeze so bad, said Freddie. Yeah, it would too, Homer said, if the pollen from one giant ragweed mixed itself with the common wild ragweed hereabout. Then next year, there'd be hybrid ragweed every place. Gosh, Homer, just like hybrid corn, the hybrid ragweeds would be bigger than ever, said Freddie. Homer nodded his head gravely. Just supposing somebody subversive, like an enemy, was to capture these seeds, Freddie. Just think, and they planted them some night right next to the White House or the Capitol. And the president and the senators and representatives all started sneezing with hay fever, Freddie said. Yep, said Homer. The president couldn't hold press conferences. Presidents don't hold press conferences anymore anyway, Homer. And the senators couldn't make speeches. And I just guess the government would just come to a stop. Everything would get tangled up and disrupt the country. You see, counting these seeds is super important. And he picked up the magnifying glass and he started to count giant ragweed seeds. Over across the town square in the barber shop, Uncle Ulysses and the committee had joined the game of rummy after they'd reported to the mayor. "It's your turn to draw a card, Ulysses," said the sheriff. "Queen of Seeds," said Uncle Ulysses, turning over a card. "Oh, Zeus," he said. "I keep seeing those things in front of my eyes. That reminds me, I better call up the lunchroom and see how Homer and Freddie are getting along." He picked up the phone and gave the number. "Hello, Homer. How are you making out? Still have a lot to count, huh?" Uncle Ulysses listened for a minute, and then he said, "We thought we'd just lock them up in the bank again. Nobody'd ever think of planting a crop of ragweeds, except Dulcie, that is. If they knew what they was planting, they wouldn't." Uncle Ulysses listened again, and he stopped smiling. Then he looked worried. "Homer," he said, trying to control his voice, "you just keep right on counting and be extra careful not to lose a single seed. Don't you worry, son. We'll take it over, and we'll think of a way to get rid of them somehow." Uncle Ulysses hung up the receiver, and he went back to the rummy game with terror in his eyes and fear in his heart. "Men," said Uncle Ulysses gravely, "we've got to think hard, or this country will be one big sneeze, clear from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Why, one single enemy plane could sow those seeds from New York to San Francisco in a couple of hours." "What are you raving about, Ulysses?" asked the barber. "It's the strain of counting all those little seeds that's got him upset, I guess," said the banker. "I am not raving," said Uncle Ulysses, glaring wildly at the rummy players. "You men put down your cards and you listen to me. We have to think, and we have to think fast, of a way to get rid of those seeds. If the wrong kind of people were to get a hold of them, it would mean the ruin of this country." "Oh, shucks, Ulysses, we're going to lock them up again in the safe deposit vault. So stop worrying and let's get on with the game," said the printer. "Stop being so complacent," Uncle Ulysses sputtered. "Banks get robbed almost every day, and you know it." Then he looked over his shoulder and he leaned way over close and he whispered hoarsely, "And the kind of people I mean wouldn't stop at nothing." "I'll lock them ragweed seeds in the jail," said the sheriff triumphantly. "That'll stop them. Charbonneau, I really don't need you knocking things over." "Oh, rubbish," said Uncle Ulysses. "As many as 20 people have broken out of your jail, Sheriff, and it's a darn sight easier to break in. Besides, the jail's got mice. Suppose some mouse was to take some of those seeds home to a hole in the ground to feed his family. Then where would we be? Right back where we were with Dulcie. Only this time we might not act in time." Uncle Ulysses was excited now, and he shouted, "Bees, bugs, we'll have to get rid of them so they won't find them. I tell you, man, if the pollen from just one of these giant ragweeds gets loose and mixes with our wild ragweeds, we'll have hybrid ragweeds bigger even than giant redwoods." All the men finally realized the seriousness of the situation, and they sat glancing uneasily at one another. The mayor was the first to move. He dashed over to the window and he looked across the deserted square into the lunchroom. "There's no use worrying those boys about this," he said, "but we'd better post a guard outside while they finish their counting. Sheriff," he ordered, "you take your gun and you cover the front entrance. And Biggs," he said, handing the barber his keys, "you'll find a revolver in the upper right-hand drawer of my desk. You guard the back entrance. The rest of us will stay here and we'll try to dope out a solution to this problem. In case of trouble, fire a shot into the air and we'll be right over to help out." The sheriff and the barber went out the door, and the rest of the men drew their chairs up close together for a conference. "Now then," said the mayor, "let's decide what to do." Nobody said anything for some minutes. They all sat thinking. Then Uncle Ulysses said, "Well, let's decide. I've heard tell that birds sometimes plant seeds in out-of-the-way places," said the banker. "Yeah, birds and mice and bugs. We have to dispose of them some way so they won't get at them," said Uncle Ulysses. The most important thing is to keep those ragweed seeds from falling into the hands of enemy agents, said Lawyer Stobbs. Sneezing could seriously impair the functioning of the executive and judicial, as well as the legislative branches of our federal government. What can we do with them? Where can we put them? How can we get rid of them so not one seed can fall into the hands of some enemy agent or mouse or bird or bug? Asked Uncle Ulysses, pacing up and down. The bank won't be safe, said the banker. Wouldn't be safe to bury the seeds, said the printer. If we hid them inside a mattress, the mice would find them, said the mayor. I was thinking if we were to hide them at the very top of the courthouse tower, that might be a good place, but pigeons, everybody said at once. Of course, said Uncle Ulysses. If we had the time, we could have a special burglar, bug, bird, and mouse-proof container made to order, something like the time capsule they bury at the World's Fair. That would take months. It would be a tremendous responsibility to guard those seeds day and night until then. Now, ladies and gentlemen, are you not like how I felt as a child, that they burned the ragweeds? Why don't they just douse these seeds in gasoline and burn them? But no one asked me. All right. I'm for calling in the FBI right now, said the banker. There isn't a single place under the earth or on the earth or a steeple over the earth that is a safe place to hide these seeds. The ocean, said Uncle Ulysses. The Atlantic Ocean. The sheriff could take the seeds to Atlantic City and hire a boat to take them out to a nice deep spot. Then he could toss the ragweed seeds overboard, and that would be that. That's it, Ulysses, said the mayor. That's a terrible idea, ladies and gentlemen. It's a terrible idea. There's a train for the east that goes through here at 12:40 tonight. We'll send the sheriff to Atlantic City to sink the seeds. I've got a metal cash box with a lock and a nice handle, said the banker. The sheriff could carry the seeds in that and handcuff it to his wrist so nobody could steal it on the train. Now, I've got some heavy lead type to put in that box just to make sure it'll sink, said the printer. That's fine, said the mayor. You two fellas get the box and weight it with type, and Lawyer Stobbs, you relieve the sheriff at the front of the lunchroom so he can go home and pack. Ulysses and myself will call the station and make reservations for the sheriff on the 12:40. All this talk of ragweed is making me get a frog in my throat. In shortly less than half an hour, the box was ready and back at the barber shop. And 5 minutes later, the sheriff came in carrying his bag, all packed and ready to go. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs, and one side he fastened to his wrist, and the other he snapped through the handle of the box. You mustn't forget to unfasten yourself before you toss the box, Sheriff, said the printer with a smile. This is no time for joking, said the mayor severely. Now, Sheriff, you realize how much depends on you. Don't speak to strangers on the train, he cautioned. And as soon as you get to Atlantic City, hire a boat and go out and sink those seeds. You can depend on me, Mayor, said the sheriff. All right, said the mayor. Let's go over to the lunchroom and pick up the seeds. The mayor led the way across the town square, followed by Uncle Ulysses, the sheriff, the banker, and the printer. Lawyer Stobbs, gun in hand, met them at the door of the lunchroom. Everything all right inside? Uncle Ulysses asked in a whisper. Yes, whispered the lawyer. I think they're all finished with counting. Shh. What's that? He said, pointing his gun out into the shadows of the square. After a tense moment of waiting, the postmaster's dog came up, wagging his tail. Everybody relaxed, and Uncle Ulysses chuckled. That dog can smell donuts cooking a mile away. Come on, let's go inside and pack up the seeds and get something to eat. I'm hungry. He opened the door and went in, followed by all the men and the postmaster's dog. "Hello, boys, all through counting, I see," said the mayor. "Ah," exclaimed Uncle Ulysses, "very thoughtful of you, Homer, to make some donuts. The sheriff can take some with him for a snack on the train. We're all pretty hungry right this minute." He paused to admire his automatic donut machine make donuts, and as he watched, the machine stopped. Uncle Ulysses had started passing out hot donuts, said, "You didn't mix up enough batter. You should have made more." "But Uncle Ulysses, we only meant to make a dozen," said Homer. "Yeah," said Freddie, who'd been counting the donuts as they came out of the machine. "We only meant to make a dozen." But then he added miserably, "But it turned out to be 13. "Well, there's enough to go around, so help yourselves, everybody," Uncle Ulysses offered. "But Uncle Ulysses," said Homer. "Freddie, you go to the back door, call the barber," Uncle Ulysses said, suddenly remembering that the barber was still guarding that door. "Uncle Ulysses," Homer started to say. "Let's get the seeds in the box and locked up," said the mayor, taking a bite of donut. "And then I'd like a cup of coffee." Freddie came back with the barber, and Uncle Ulysses handed him a donut. Then he turned to Homer. "Get the ragweed seeds, son, and put them in the box the sheriff's got dangling from his wrist." "But Uncle Ulysses," said Homer, "that's what I've been trying to tell you." Then he asked, "Have you ever heard of a berry growing into a berry bush after it had once been cooked into a pie?" Uncle Ulysses had a mouthful of donut, and so did all the other men. So they all shook their heads. "No." "Have you ever heard of a nut growing into a nut tree after being baked into a cookie?" Homer asked. And again, all the men nodded their heads because they're chewing donuts and trying to swallow. "Popcorn won't grow after it's been popped either," said Freddie, "because I tried once." Uncle Ulysses gulped and said, "Homer, you're a good boy. It's getting late. You and Freddie run along home now." After Homer and Freddie had gone, the mayor fed the rest of his donut to the postmaster's dog. So did Uncle Ulysses. So did the barber. So did the jeweler, the printer, the banker, the sheriff, and Lawyer Stobbs. Then they fed him the rest of the donuts and watched silently while he ate up every last crumb. As the last crumb disappeared, the sheriff said, "Well, there goes my trip to Atlantic City." And the barber said, "From now on, every time I look at that dog or even mail a letter, I'll probably have to..." And here's the picture of the dog, ladies and gentlemen. The dog thought it was a great evening. Look at that look on that dog. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right. That is the end of Experiment 13. Experiment 13 from Homer Price from Centerburg Tales. Thank you for joining us for this. I will be gone the next few weeks. BENCHLEY NIGHT will start up again after I return. I get back on the 22nd or 23rd. So we'll see you again then. You take good care. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.